that an intro? Okay, I'll take it. It's not the best in the world, but it's better than nothing, right? Hi, welcome to Board Gems. This is my regular video series in which I cover older board game gems. I'm your host, some guy. So the game I'm covering for this episode is because there's a Kickstarter out now for the second edition of this game, which I have the first edition of, and that's Pergamon. Now, this was originally published by Eggertspiele back, I think, 2011, around that time, so about 10 years ago, and designed by Stefan Dora and Ralph Zurlinde. And the English edition, this English edition, was available from Griffin Games, and they, or Eagle Griffin, I guess now, they're the ones that are publishing on Kickstarter right now. They're producing a second edition of this. So at the time of recording, and by the time this goes live, the Kickstarter is still live. If you want to go check it out, it'll probably be going away in a couple of days. But don't worry, Eagle Griffin, their games appear in game stores. So hopefully you should be able to find Pergamon 2nd Edition, even if you missed the Kickstarter. Pergamon is for 2 to 4 players. Now with 2 players, there is kind of a dummy third player, but it's not as bad as some games that have dummy third players. You're not taking turns controlling them. It's just a very simple set of rules that a Tomb Raider comes and takes away some artifacts randomly. But otherwise, it works pretty well. And the box says 45 minutes. In my experience, it's a little bit of a fiction. Okay, the 2-player games I've played have probably been 45 minutes, but usually I play this 3 or 4 players, and my games have gone over an hour. And I believe it says ages 10 and up, which is pretty fair. So in this game, we are excavators, archaeologists. We are trying to dig up artifacts to put on exhibits in the museum. And so there's a multi-step process to this game. You're looking to secure funding. You use that funding to dig into that kind of the strata of the earth and trying to dig up artifacts, then piece them together into like an exhibit, which then you put in the museum. And at regular points during the game, the museum will score points for all the exhibits that are in it. And at the end of the game, the player with the most points wins. So let me show you how it plays in more detail. Then I'll talk about why this is still a gem. Definitely still a gem today. To set up the game, place the board on the table between the players. Give each player a player aid, 1 pawn, and 3 round tokens. They're literally round. They'll go on these museum spaces, as well as 3 exhibit markers. There are a number of artifact tiles, and the rules in this edition state that you stack up the 60 tiles into piles of 5 each and stack them on the 12 calendar spaces. These mark the rounds. In practice, I find that it's a little bit hard to see these icons when that happens, because the stacks are a little bit tall, so it just obscures it a little bit. What I do, and this is what they do in the 2nd edition too, is you have a round marker. In the 2-player game, you have this kind of dummy player, which is called the Tomb Raider, but in a 3 or 4-player game, you can use this as a round marker, and take all the tiles and just mix them up in a bag. At the start of the game, you're going to draw 5 tokens. So now each artifact tile has 2 halves of an artifact and an age. You'll see when you combine 2 artifacts, 2 halves of an artifact, it also generates the year. So this artifact is from 539 AC, or Ante Christum, BC anyway, before Common Era. So you're going to rank these from youngest to oldest, and you're going to start with the century number, which is the larger number. The youngest artifact is going to go on the top strata here, and then you're going to go down like so. And in the case of ties, you're going to go by the smaller number, the decades and years. So 12 is younger than 39, which is younger than 87. You'll be doing this every round. Another thing you'll do every round is you will draw 2 funding cards, and you'll place them to the side of the board here. I'm not sure if this is off camera, maybe I'll put it like so. At the beginning of the game, you're going to shuffle up this deck, and at the start of every round, you're going to draw 2 and place them face down. They have 2 different backs, as you can see. And you're ready to begin. I'm going to teach the 3 or 4 player game. The 2-player game involves a dummy player. I'm not going to get involved in that. You can look it up yourself if that interests you, but I'm going to teach sort of the basic 3 or 4 player game. The game takes place over 12 rounds, during which there are 4 scoring rounds. And in every scoring round, you are going to score points for the exhibits you have in the museum. An exhibit is a combination of combined artifacts. So let's make an exhibit here. It's composed of 2 artifacts, each aged 5. You can declare this to be one exhibit of 2 artifacts, and you would take your matching round token and place it on the space for that value of exhibit. So if this value is 10, 5 plus 5, you're going to place it here. And during a scoring round, if that marker is still there, it will score 3 points. But after every scoring round, all the exhibits get devalued. We'll talk about that a little bit later. In order to get artifacts, in order to build exhibits, you need to dig, and in order to dig, you need money. And money comes in the form of funding. Every round, 2 of these funding cards will be placed face down, and everyone can see the backs. Each of these cards has a range. You'll see this card ranges from 1 to 4. And these cards range from 5 to 8. You don't exactly know what the values are. At the start of the game, mix up the pawns and place them in the turn order track randomly, like so. So starting with the player in the 1 space, they're going to place their pawn on any of these spaces on the top row of the board. Now each space has 3 qualities. This is how much money you are asking in funding. This is how deep you will be allowed to dig. So this can only dig as far as level 2, whereas this can dig down as deep as level 5. And the spaces to the right will go before spaces on the left. This comes into play very importantly in terms of funding. Once players decide what they want to do, based on the money that they think will be coming out, each player will place their pawn on a different space, like so, and then the funding cards are revealed. In this case, it's 9 coins, and each player will get a number of coins based on what they asked for, starting with the player who asked for the least, the player who's furthest to the right on this track. So red would get 2 coins, green would get 3, a little bit of gambling there. You don't know how much funding is available, and you have to decide how much to ask for, and whether you want to be sure you get it and go earlier, or take a chance and try to get more money, but go later and risk not getting as much as you hoped, or potentially getting more than you asked for. So now this is the turn order. So in this case, starting with red, red will go first. Red got their money, 2 coins. And they don't have to, but they may choose any one of the 4 rows that's listed on their space. You see they decided to dig as low as 4. So they're not allowed to dig in level 5, but they can dig in any of the top 4 levels. And they pay a number of coins equal to the level, and they take all the artifacts on that row. Now red only has 2 coins, so they can only really dig down as deep as level 2. So let's say red does that. Red pays 2 coins and takes all the artifacts, which of course right now is just 1, and takes that artifact. After a player takes a row of artifacts or not, they can decide whether to put on an exhibit. They combine all their artifact tokens to make a big connected line of them, place an exhibit marker to one side, total up the centuries, and then place the matching museum round marker on the space for that exhibit. Anytime you put on an exhibit, you immediately score 1 point. At this point, they may also spend up to 3 coins to polish their artifacts, which would bump it up to 3 spaces. Let's get a bunch more artifacts here. Let's say that a couple turns later, red had this many artifacts. So something like that, for example, and they're going to hang on to this one. They can't fit it. So in this case, they mark it as Exhibit 1. They total up the centuries, 8, 12, 14, and place their marker on space 14. Then they may optionally spend up to 3 coins to move it up an additional up to 3 spaces. Now, whenever a new exhibit is added to the museum, any exhibits that are on the same space or lower move down 1 space, reflecting the visitor's lower desire to visit these exhibits. They want to visit the new one. If ever a marker moves off the last space, then that exhibit is freed up. The player will get their exhibit marker back, and all those artifacts can go away into the box. After they do that, and they don't have to, they can hang on to their tokens, but after they decide to put on exhibits, they must decide what to do with any remaining tokens they have. They can store up to 3 artifact tiles for free, but have to spend 1 coin for up to every additional 3 tokens. So they can store up to 6 artifact tiles for 1 coin, or up to 9 artifact tiles for 2 coins. And if they can't afford it or they don't want to pay it, they can also discard artifact tiles. And then this player will place their marker on the last available space on the turn order track. And then it's the next player's turn, who can then also decide what to dig for. Maybe they spend 3 coins to get this one, but they only have the 1 tile. They're not going to put on an exhibit yet, and they're going to go into space 2. And now yellow has lots of money. They can only dig as far as 4, but they want to save their money. Maybe they just spend 1 coin to get this cheap one, and again they don't put on an exhibit. Now this is the order for turn 2. We move the marker to round 2. We draw another 2 funding cards. So sometimes it'll be a low funding round, sometimes it'll be a high funding round. This one's somewhere in the middle. And then we add 5 new tiles. 1, again, the youngest to the highest row. And so these rows are going to have 2 tokens by the end of this. If a row already has 4 artifact tiles, don't add any more. Skip that row. And now you continue again, second round, this time starting from the player who went last to the previous round, in this case, yellow. Now what happens at the end of a scoring round? This is round 5, scoring round. Every exhibit in the museum will score its owner points. In this case, red would score 4 points, yellow would score 3, and green would score 2. And players can have up to 3 exhibits in a museum at one time. If ever they want to put on a 4th and they already have 3 in there, then they would throw away 1, usually the lowest valued one. And then the player who has the oldest artifact of this type will score a bonus 2 points. And then all exhibits will be devalued. In this scoring round, 3 spaces. In this round 4, and we score the silver pitchers. In this round, devalue them 5 and score the golden masks. And in the last scoring round, you're going to get a bonus 2 points for the oldest green bracelet. And then at that point, the player with the oldest exhibit in the museum, so the one that occupies the highest valued space in the museum, will score 3 points. And second place 2, and third place 1. And the player with the most points wins. That's it. You're ready to play Pergamon. Pergamon is exactly the type of game I like to feature on this channel. Alright, it's pretty simple rules. It's a multi-step process getting points, but overall the flow makes a lot of sense. It really ties into the theme really well, the theme and setting. So basically just to teach the game once, so people don't have like tons of questions like how does this part work again? No, it all kind of makes sense. So the rules just kind of melt away. Now there isn't a lot of direct player interaction, but still you can puzzle things out a little bit on your turn. It can be thinky if you want it to be. So it's a multi-step process in getting points. So first there's the funding aspect. You have to get funding, and there's a certain amount of funding that comes out every month. Yes, it's every month. Every round is every month. And you don't know exactly how much, but you have kind of a feel for, like a range. And then players guess, or they decide where on this track to go. And the track decides how much money they get, how deep they're able to go, and their turn order. And there's a lovely little gambling aspect to that, because if it's a big payout expected, it's possible for people to try to shoot the moon. It's like, well, I don't really care about going early, so I'm just going to go last, and I'm going to hope it's going to be like a big payout, and I'm going to get tons and tons of money, right? But the reverse can happen. The money dries up. All the players earlier in turn order use up, they get their funding, and then the funding pool is used up by the time it gets to the players later in turn order. So it's a lovely little gambling aspect, and you know, you might be cursing a little bit during the game, just like, oh no, I have no money, right? And there's been a few times where I expected to get more money and I didn't, and then I didn't have enough money to dig where I wanted to dig, right? Because there's the 5 levels and each level costs 1 coin extra. So, oh, I wanted to dig 3 levels down, but I only got 2 coins, and now I can't afford to dig where I wanted to. So there's a lovely bit of risk-taking, a kind of a gambling element that's really solid and really fun at the start of every round. There's also an interesting timing aspect in terms of when to put on your shows. So obviously there's the preset scoring rounds, that there's 4 rounds during the game in which you definitely are going to score. And there's particular artifacts that score for each round. So there's kind of a push to get your exhibits out with those artifacts in time for those scoring rounds. But there's also, you have to consider how long they're going to be in the museum, because they degrade in value over time. Like, you can put on smaller shows, and if you can put on many of them, you know, you get 1 point per show plus whatever points they score at the time of scoring, the scoring rounds. But little exhibits, like the low-valued scoring exhibits, are quicker to devalue when new exhibits come in. So there's also a push to put in like a big exhibit that's worth a lot early on. And it will devalue, but it will devalue slower, because new exhibits coming in, as long as they're lower in value, they're not devaluing the exhibits that are higher in value. So your really high valued exhibit, even if it goes in early, it's going to hang around for a while, and it's going to score points every scoring round until finally it drops off the end. But of course you want your exhibits to have the oldest artifacts for the scoring round as they come up, right? So, okay, it's the golden mask is going to score 2 bonus points. So you want to make sure that your exhibit with the really old golden mask is going to be there in time for that. So it's not a simple decision necessarily as to when to start your exhibit. Like, you have enough, but maybe you should hang on and do like another, like get more and kind of do a bigger one, right? And that might take a few plays to kind of get a feel for that. Definitely worth multiple plays. This is a game you definitely can get better over time. Now, there is, in practice, I suppose, there is an upper limit, right? It's not a super deep strategic game. Again, it's a game that presents simple rules and just gets your brain synapses firing in fun ways. right? It's every turn is a little bit of a, not a puzzle. I don't want to exaggerate that aspect to it, but there's definitely things to think about every turn. Where to put on the track, right? Which level to excavate or not excavate at all, whether to put on an exhibit, and if so, obviously that part's a puzzle, trying to figure out which artifacts to put together. You can't devalue the fun of just trying to fit together all those little artifact tiles and try to make a nice big exhibit. The game is pretty interactive. It's one of those older style games that only came out in 2011, but Stefan Dora is a old time. He probably doesn't watch these, but he'll forgive me hopefully for saying he's kind of an old timey kind of board game designer. I mean, he's been designing games since the early 90s, I think, or published games. And his friend Ralph Zurlinda is they're real life friends, and he has his own design kind of sensibilities as well. But you can definitely see or feel some of the Dora influence. Dora has a particular style, and he's a master at making games really kind of fundamentally interactive in a way that a lot of newer games aren't. There's no direct interaction really in this game. It's competition for, I'm trying to dig level 3 before you are, for example. But the interaction comes in in terms of when you're putting your exhibits into the museum, you can spend extra money to polish it, and you want to polish it so it's at least as good as maybe another exhibit, so you can devalue that one, right? And you can definitely kind of think about what the other players are going to do on their turn, right? Okay, so they put their pawn here on this track, and they said they're only going to dig down as far as level 2. Are they just getting the money, or they do intend to dig? And let's see, if they're going to do that, then that probably leaves level 4 for me to dig. You can puzzle things out a little bit, but it's not like this crazy complicated game that's super, super crazy deep and will have people suffering from analysis paralysis for 10 minutes a turn. No, it's not that game at all. It's a light game for hobbyists. If that's one way to put it anyway. Casual gamers can absolutely enjoy it, but there's a level that hobbyists can enjoy. It's like an extra level on top of that. I really appreciate the design. I really respect it. In some ways it's the best of both worlds, right? Because it's a game that casual gamers can get into, but it has that extra level of thinkiness that hobbyists can enjoy. But like anything, something that is potentially the best of both worlds is also potentially the worst of both worlds. And I guess I could understand somebody saying that Pergamon is the worst of both worlds, because it's not a complicated game, but there is a level of planning involved that can punish casual players from playing a little too casually, right? And because of the random draw of the artifacts and the random funding that comes out every round, I can picture some hobbyists complaining, oh, there's too much luck. And okay, so these hobbyists who complain about luck in a game like Pergamon, I don't know, are you expecting chess? Is that what you're looking for in this game? I expect a level of randomness, and I expect that my planning is going to be reactive to the randomness that comes out. This round is a low funding round. There's not much funding to go around. How does that change my plan? I had hoped to dig in level 5, but I don't have enough money already saved up, and I don't think I'll get enough money this round. So how does that change my plan, right? The randomness makes you change your plans. I'm always kind of surprised when I read kind of complaints about games that I happen to like, and I see complaints like, oh, there's too much luck. Are you planning 4, 5, 6 moves ahead and then the luck messes you up? Yes, that would be frustrating if that was the case. But it's a little bit of cart before the horse, right? The randomness comes first, and your planning is based on the randomness. It's reactive. This is the situation right now. What are you going to do? Maybe you had a different plan. You're going to have to change it now, aren't you? In some ways, this is the type of game that used to be popular, the OG types of games that peaked in popularity in the late 90s. Just games that had simple rules, were quite interactive, not necessarily in an attack each other kind of way, but there was competition, and the competition was a little bit, you know, head to head in a 4-player game, right? It wasn't everybody just working on their own solitary little puzzle and, oh, they accidentally bump into each other on a shared board. No, you're looking to see what other players are doing and you're reacting to that. So, you know, in some ways, this is a great throwback to those old style games, my favorite types of games. I don't have a lot of complaints about the game. It's a little repetitive. I mean, I don't have a problem with it because every round, I mean, there's a natural arc, right? The game takes place over 12 rounds. And over that whole time, you know, there's the rise and fall of your exhibits, right? You're getting artifacts, you're putting on exhibits, you're getting points, but then the exhibits start to devalue while you're working on your next exhibit. So there's a natural ebb and flow to the game. However, 12 rounds to some people might feel a little bit long. I know my family was like that. By the 9th round, 3-player game, 9th round, they were getting kind of tired of the game. Which is a shame, you know. In this type of game, it's you're kind of looking for that ebb and flow, right? There's a rise and fall of the exhibits when you're putting them on, and if the game is too short, you're just gonna have you know, the first peak and then that's it, right? You want a game, some games, not all games, but you want some games to have a rise and fall, right? And you're reacting to that, and this game is sort of like that, but the 45 minutes, from my experience, the 45 minutes listed on the box is a bit of a fiction. Like I said at the top, a 2-player game can probably be banged out in 45 minutes, sure. But, you know, I usually play this game with 3 or 4 players, and it goes well over an hour. At a minimum, 45 minutes. But for a 3-player or 4-player game, you're probably looking more like 60, 75, in my experience. Again, this is not a complaint that I have, but I could see other people having this complaint, is that probably once you play this a couple of times, you'll pretty much see everything in this game. The game is long enough that you see those peaks and valleys, you know, as you're building your exhibits, and you're doing that a couple times over the course of the game. Next time you play, obviously it's going to be a little bit different. Obviously, you know, which rounds are high funding, which are low funding, what exhibit artifacts you're getting and putting together in what ways. Every game is going to be different, but they all kind of have a similar flow to them, such that if you're looking for, like, you know, to be, you know, 5th play, just you come across something new that you hadn't thought of before, this game isn't really like that. But each game does have enough variability that you can't just go in with a single strategy at the beginning of every game and expect that to work out. You do have to be reactive to the funding levels and which artifacts are coming out where, and kind of be flexible to that. But yeah, I could see somebody thinking that, you know, after a couple of games, maybe they've seen everything there is to see. If you're looking for novelty in a game, it's definitely fun for a couple of plays, then it loses the novelty. But the game is still fun to play. You know, in terms of a kind of design sensibility, one thing, and it's just a personal preference, is that there's exactly as many artifact tiles in the game as you need. So there's 60 artifact tiles. You add 5 every round for 12 rounds. And the funding cards, you're going to put out 2 funding cards every round for 12 rounds. So you're going to see every single funding card. So it is possible for players, and I don't know, maybe you could argue this is an extra level, but it's not an extra level that's fun for me, is you can kind of card count, right? Like, if you know the makeup of the cards, you can know, like, oh, we haven't seen that 8 come out, so I know that there's going to be an 8 coming out later, and I know it's going to be a high funding round. And the artifact tiles can be the same way. If you played a lot and you learn which artifact tiles are out there, I guess by the last round it's like, okay, I know which tiles are going to be there. I guess if I was designing, and this is a stupid thing to say, right? Because, you know, I'm not a game designer, and it feels weird sometimes to critique a board game design from somebody who is very, very skilled at game designs, like both of these game designers are. I probably would have, again, just personal preference, have a little bit more. So instead of 24 cards, have a little bit more, have 30 cards or something, right? Instead of 60 artifacts, maybe you have, I don't know, 70 or something. Just so you're not seeing the same artifacts necessarily every game. It's not, in this game, you're going to see everything by the end, and the question is the order. I personally like a little bit more unpredictability. But for the thinkiness level that I play this game at, it's not a problem. I'm not, looking out for that particular funding card that I haven't seen yet, but it's possible. Now, one interesting thing, this is important to know if you're seeking out this edition of Pergamon, the first edition, is that the publisher, Eggertspiele, seems to have changed one rule. And Stefan Dorr, who does not often post on Board Game Geek, actually did post to say, actually, you should play it this way. What I think he means is you should play this way for hobbyists. Like, people on Board Game Geek should play it this way. The way I taught the game is how the designer, one of the designers, Stefan Dorr, came out publicly to say this is the way it should be played, which is there's a turn order track, right? And the players who played last in turn order in the previous round will go earlier in the next turn order. So it's not clockwise. But in the rules as published, that's a variant. And if you just read the rules and don't look at the variant, the rules as published in this edition say, yes, the last player will go first, but after that go clockwise. And I have played that way, but I don't recommend it. Stick with the rules as intended, which is the variant in the rules in this box. So I need to talk about the second edition. The second edition, which is at the time of recording and the time this is going live, is live on Kickstarter. So if this game sounds interesting to you, just go ahead. And if shipping's not crazy, go ahead, back it on Kickstarter. From what I know of the second edition, for one thing, it's in a larger box. Well, it's longer and wider. This is Carcassonne sized. The second edition has a longer box and a wider box, but I think it's thinner, so I'm not sure if it's bigger volume-wise or not. That variant I described is standard. That's standard rules now. It's the turn order track. No clockwise anything now. They sped up the beginning a little bit. So instead of 60 tiles and 5 come out every round, instead there's more. There's like 66 or something. And you're actually putting out almost twice as many tiles in that first round. So I guess the idea is to speed up the early game a bit. It is true in this edition that the first five artifacts come out, and a lot of people will look at them and go, especially if it's a low funding round, they end up not buying anything that first round. I don't think it's a problem, because it just means there's going to be more artifacts later, so then, when you do dig, you're getting more, right? But I guess they decided to speed it up a little bit, so they put more artifacts in to start. The artifacts that they added are little, and this is nice actually, little bonus artifacts. So there are some artifact tiles that give you bonus points for an exhibit that has them. So they're special artifacts. But some of them are very fragile, so you have to pay extra money when you excavate them. Nice little, tiny little variant, right? I like that. Instead of all the tiles kind of being basically the same, now you got some special ones coming out. Instead of stacking the tiles on the calendar, they do give you a round marker. I think it's like a little sundial piece, which is how I taught it using the Tomb Raider for 2 players. Use a round marker. So now it comes with a round marker. So again, that's a little bit of a better choice. And they just dump all the tiles in a bag. I think it comes with a bag. So from what I know of the second edition, it looks pretty good, actually. I'm pretty happy with what they've done. So I don't know if I'm going to do the Kickstarter, though, because I have the game. And usually Kickstarters are, shipping-wise, are a little expensive for me. Since it's going to be put out by Eagle Gryphon, it should be available in stores. And I'm waiting to see what it's going to look like. I'm very likely to get that second edition. And then I'll have both, and then I'll decide which one I want to keep with the other in the restaurant or something. One weird change is they moved up one of the scoring rounds. So if I remember correctly, in this game, their scoring rounds are 5, 7, 9, and 12. And they changed it now, so the first scoring round is actually round 4. bit of a weird kind of lateral change. I'm not sure that I like it, but I mean, I'm sure they tested it a lot, and I have not tested it. I kind of like it the way it is, but look, it's not a big deal. I have a lot of confidence in the designers, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to say up front, but we're nearing the end of this video. This is exactly my type of game, and for me, it's a strong recommendation. Now look, this video series is not a buyer's guide. Just because I say something is a gem, please don't rush out and try to buy it. Actually, no, it's okay. You can buy this one. Because it's on Kickstarter. Usually I give that warning for some old game that's hard to find. Then people watch a video and they say, oh, I watched your video and then I had to search around and try to find this game. And I'm like, well, don't try too hard, okay? You know, if you spend way too much money to find some old game and then you try it and you don't like it, you know, like, don't blame me. Please don't blame me. But if you've watched a number of these videos, I think you have a sense of the type of game that I like. And if you have found that you like similar types of games that I do, you definitely need to look at Pergamon, because this is exactly my kind of game. It's super clever, super simple to learn. The rules melt away. And because the rules are so well tied to the setting, so it's super easy to explain. And everybody can just kind of get it, right? It's like, okay, I get it, let's play. And the only knock, if there is one, is that maybe it's a little bit long, at least in my experience. My family has kind of complained it's a little long. I have fun the whole time, but I've experienced that, or I've experienced people that have said that, so I wanted to pass that on. But otherwise, very strong recommendation from me. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like Pergamon don't stop being good just because newer games come out. Take care.